I've run before, after suspects, away from danger, but never like this. Running from Haven wasn't just about saving my life. It felt like I was running from something deeper, something that had already decided it was going to find me, no matter how far I went. The grass in the open fields was wet with night dew, soaking through my boots. Every few steps, my ankle twisted in a hidden rut, but I didn't slow. Neither did Maria or Jake. Behind us, the faint orange glow of Haven's torches was still visible, flickering against the dark sky. But the sound was gone. No more shouting, no more gunfire. Just the low, steady moan of the horde somewhere back in the dark. My breath tore at my lungs and every exhale burned. We didn't speak. There wasn't time. Not yet. Somewhere behind my pounding heartbeat, I could still hear the echo of her voice. Not words, not exactly, more like the shape of words. The kind you can almost make out when someone whispers from another room. Maria stumbled and I grabbed her arm before she fell. Her skin was clammy, her eyes wide. "You okay?" I whispered. She nodded, but her lips trembled. Jake had already stopped a few paces ahead, scanning the dark horizon. "We can't keep this up," he said, voice low. "We need cover before sunrise." I looked around. Out here, cover meant a few skeletal trees, a couple of fence lines, and the husk of an old barn leaning toward collapse. Not much between us and anything that wanted to see us. We headed for the barn. Inside, it smelled like mold and rust. The roof had holes big enough to see the stars through, and half the floor was rotted planks over dirt. But it was walls. And right now walls were good. Jake barred the door with a fallen beam. Maria sank onto a stack of hay bales that looked about a decade old. No one spoke for a long time. When my hands finally stopped shaking enough to work my belt, I reloaded the pistol. 2 spare magazines left. Jake had a half-full rifle mag, and Maria had nothing but a kitchen knife she'd taken from Haven's mess hall. The silence in the barn was wrong. Too big, too empty. No crickets. No wind through the grass. Like the whole world was holding its breath. I broke it first. Grant knew something about her. The barefoot woman. He kept us inside for a reason. Jake snorted without looking at me. Of course he knew. And now Haven's paying for it. Maria shook her head. It's more than that. In the infirmary, they took blood from everyone, remember? What if it wasn't just about infection? What if they were looking for something? Jake glanced at her then, but said nothing. I rubbed my temples. The headache had been building since we left. A pressure behind my eyes, like the air before a thunderstorm. Every now and then, I thought I could hear the faint sound of bare feet on dirt, keeping pace with us somewhere far behind. We didn't sleep much. At first light, Jake eased the beam off the door, and we stepped out into the pale morning. Mist clung to the grass, curling low along the ground. The city wasn't visible yet, but Jake said if we kept moving northeast, we'd hit the outskirts by nightfall. We passed an old gas station around mid-morning. The glass was shattered, the shelves inside stripped bare. A rusted sedan sat half on the curb, its doors hanging open like broken wings. Jake checked the pumps dry. Maria found a vending machine in the corner, its plastic front cracked. She kicked it once, and 2 dusty bags of chips dropped into the tray. We split them without a word. That's when I noticed it. Across the street, on the roof of a diner, an infected stood perfectly still. It wasn't watching us. Not exactly. Its head was tilted back, eyes fixed on the sky like it was waiting for something. We froze. Is it stuck? Maria whispered. Jake shook his head slowly. No, it's listening. We moved on, keeping low between the buildings. The infected never moved, never blinked. But long after it was out of sight, I couldn't shake the image. That face turned upward, listening to something none of us could hear. By noon, the sun burned away the mist, and the air turned sharp and dry. We crossed a small bridge over a creek, the water running shallow and brown beneath us. That's where we found the first body. It was a man, maybe mid-40s, sprawled against the railing. His shirt was soaked in dried blood, but the wound wasn't from a bite. It was a bullet, center of the forehead. In his lap, a radio, military grade, the kind you'd use to reach someone miles away. Jake knelt and turned the dial. Static, then a faint voice. All survivors, Hospital Sector 3, repeat. Safe zone established. The signal cut out. Maria's eyes lit up. Hospital, that means medicine. Supplies. Jake scowled. Or it means another haven. I stayed quiet, staring at the body. The man's hand was still clenched around the radio, like he'd died mid-call. We left him there. The afternoon stretched on, the land flattening into open lots dotted with rusting machinery. Once, we heard a gunshot far to the east. Once, we saw smoke curling up from behind a stand of trees. We avoided both. By the time the city's skyline finally came into view, jagged against the setting sun, my legs felt like lead. The streets closest to us were narrow, lined with row houses and shuttered corner stores. No cars moved. No birds flew. It was the kind of silence that felt full, like it was pressing in from all sides. Jake stopped at the edge of the first block, rifle raised. We move fast. If you see anything, you don't freeze. You don't shout. You just act. Maria and I nodded. We stepped onto the cracked pavement, our footsteps the only sound in the world. Somewhere above us, a loose sign creaked in the wind. And then, from far down the street, came the faint sound of crying. A child's voice, soft, broken. Maria's eyes went wide. We have to. Jake grabbed her arm. It's a trick. But I was already moving toward the sound. The crying led us 2 blocks deeper into the city. Every corner we turned felt like stepping further into a graveyard. Shattered glass crunched underfoot, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. The buildings leaned close here. Old brick apartments, their windows blacked out by grime or plywood. We passed a bus lying on its side, the windows blown out, the smell of old fuel hanging in the air. The sound grew clearer. A child, no older than 6 or 7, sobbing somewhere close. It wasn't the wailing kind of cry you'd expect from a kid in danger. It was quiet, almost careful, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. I slowed outside a narrow doorway hanging crooked on its hinges. The crying was inside. Maria edged past me, peering into the gloom. "It's okay," she whispered, voice trembling but warm. "We're not going to hurt you." Jake stayed back, rifle raised. "This is bait. I've seen it before. They use a kid's voice. You get soft and then..." "Then what?" Maria snapped. "Leave them?" He didn't answer. I stepped inside first. The hallway smelled of damp carpet and old rot. Light spilled in through a crack in the ceiling, catching dust motes that drifted like ash. The crying stopped. We moved slowly, checking each doorway. Second on the left. That's where we found him. A boy, maybe 7, crouched under a bed. His hair was matted, his face streaked with dirt. He clutched a stuffed bear so worn it was missing an ear. When he saw us, his eyes went wide, but he didn't scream. He just pressed himself tighter against the wall. Maria crouched, setting her knife on the floor where he could see she wasn't holding it. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're here to help." No answer. Just breathing, fast and shallow. I took a step forward, kneeling beside Maria. "My name's Claire," I said. "This is Maria and Jake. Where? We're not staying here. You shouldn't either." His eyes darted between us, then to Jake, who stood stiff in the doorway, scanning the hall. Maria reached out her hand. "Come with us." The boy hesitated, then crawled out slowly, the bear still clutched to his chest. His clothes hung loose, and one sleeve was stiff with dried blood. Not his, I hoped. We got him outside. Jake didn't hide his frustration. "We're slower now." Louder. "And if he's been bitten..." "He hasn't," Maria cut in. "You don't know that." "I do." Her tone was sharp enough to make him back off. We didn't have time to argue. Movement on the far end of the street caught my eye. 2 figures, walking slow. Then 4. Then 6. They weren't rushing us, just moving with that strange, unsettling calm I'd seen before. Their eyes fixed on us. One of them, a man in a torn suit, tilted his head the same way the infected on the diner roof had, listening to something. "Move," Jake hissed. We ducked into a side alley, the boy clinging to Maria's hand. The alley was narrow, lined with dumpsters and the stench of rot. I could hear the slow footsteps behind us, measured, unhurried. Halfway through, we hit a fence, 6 feet high, chain link, topped with barbed wire. Jake dropped his rifle over, climbed up, and swung himself to the other side. "Come on." Maria went next, boosting the boy up before hauling herself over. When my turn came, the footsteps were closer. I reached the top, the barbed wire biting at my jacket. On the other side, Jake caught my arm and pulled me down. We didn't stop running until we were 2 streets away. We found a small courtyard between 3 buildings, half hidden from the road. A dry fountain sat in the middle, weeds curling through its cracks. For now, it was shelter. The boy wouldn't talk, not even when Maria tried to ask his name. He sat on the fountain's edge, chewing on the earless bear and staring at the ground. When I knelt in front of him, he finally glanced up, and I saw something that made my stomach tighten. A mark, faint but clear, just behind his ear, like a small burn. It reminded me of the fever marks we'd seen on the infected in Haven before they turned. But this one was different. Cleaner. Deliberate. Maria noticed my stare. "What is it?" "Nothing," I lied. Jake checked the street again. "We can't sit here. If those things are moving like that, it means they're not wandering. They're tracking." I knew he was right. And if they were tracking us, then the barefoot woman might not be far behind. We moved on, sticking to the shadowed sides of buildings. At an intersection, we froze. A single infected stood in the middle of the road, swaying slightly. It wasn't looking at us, but its head turned slowly, as if following some invisible signal. The hospital was still a couple of miles away, and the sun was sinking fast. Jake wanted to find a defensible spot for the night. Maria wanted to push on. I was caught in between. The thought of sleeping in this city made my skin crawl, but moving after dark was suicide. That's when we heard it. The sound of an engine, not far, not muffled like a distant car. This was close. We ducked behind a burned-out van as a jeep rolled past the intersection ahead. 2 people in the front, a man and a woman, both armed. The man drove with one hand, the other resting casually on a shotgun across his lap. The woman scanned the street, eyes sharp. She saw the infected in the road, leveled her pistol, and dropped it with a single shot. The jeep didn't slow. Maria started to stand, but Jake pulled her down. "We don't know who they are. They're alive," she said, "and they can drive. That doesn't make them good." The boy was watching the jeep too, his fingers tightening around his bear. "They know," he whispered. I turned to him. "Know what?" "She told them." A chill ran through me. Who told them? He looked at me like I was stupid. The woman with no shoes. We stayed hidden until the jeep's sound faded. Then we moved again, fast. The light was fading, and the streets seemed to stretch longer and longer. Every doorway felt like an eye watching us. I kept expecting to hear the faint clap of bare feet on the asphalt. We finally ducked into an old bookstore, its front window cracked but not shattered. The inside was dim, dust thick in the air. Rows of shelves leaned like crooked teeth. It wasn't much, but it had a lock on the back door and only one front window to cover. Jake set his rifle down with a sigh. "We'll rest here. Just for a few hours." Maria pulled the boy into a corner, sitting with her arm around him. I found a spot by the window, my eyes scanning the street. The silence was deeper here, heavier, until I realized it wasn't silent. Somewhere out there, under the hum of the city, was the faintest whisper, and it was getting louder. Night comes differently in the city now. It's not the kind of night I remember. The hum of streetlights, the glow of windows, the muffled sound of people living their lives. Now, darkness falls like a slow tide, seeping into every crack, drowning every corner until the streets are nothing but hollow black tunnels. We'd covered the bookstore windows as best we could with dusty tarps and broken boards from the stockroom. Jake had posted himself at the front window with the rifle, while I checked the back door twice to make sure the lock would hold. Maria sat with the boy in the far corner, quietly feeding him the last of the vending machine chips. No one spoke much. The walls felt thin here, like the city could hear us if we raised our voices. Around midnight, Jake tapped the glass with his knuckle. "Something's moving out there," he whispered. I joined him at the window, peering through a sliver in the tarp. The street was empty at first glance. Then I saw it. A shadow slipping between buildings, too fast to be wandering infected. It stopped under a street lamp with no light, standing in the dark like it belonged there. "Human?" I asked. "Too careful to be anything else," Jake said. We both knew human didn't mean safe. Half an hour passed without movement. Then the sound came. Faint footsteps. Not from the street, but from inside the building. I felt it in my teeth before I heard it properly. A slow creak of weight on wooden floorboards somewhere toward the back. Jake had the rifle up in seconds. I drew my pistol, motioning Maria to keep the boy still. The sound stopped. I held my breath. Then another creak. Closer this time. We moved toward the stockroom. The air back there was colder, the smell of mildew stronger. Jake stepped ahead, pushing the door open with the rifle's barrel. The stockroom was empty, or so it seemed. Stacks of old boxes leaned in every direction, and in the corner, a pile of collapsed shelving made a kind of blind spot. Jake moved to check it. I covered him. He froze halfway there. "Claire," he said low. "Look." On the floor, a set of wet footprints. Bare, but not normal. The toes were too long, the arch too flat, like whoever left them wasn't built right. They led from the back door straight toward the shelves. Jake took another step, and a figure burst from the shadows. It hit him hard enough to knock the rifle from his hands. I caught a glimpse. Gaunt, pale, clothes hanging in tatters, eyes wide with something beyond hunger. Its hands went straight for his throat. I didn't think, I just fired. The shot echoed through the building like a thunderclap. The figure jerked back, hit the boxes, and slid to the floor. For a moment, no one moved. My ears rang. Maria's voice came from the front. "Claire." But it wasn't fear in her tone. It was warning. I turned. The boy was gone. The corner where Maria had been sitting was empty, her hand still gripping the handle of the knife she'd been holding. But no boy. The tarp at the front window flapped slightly, and cold air slipped in. Jake grabbed his rifle and cursed. He bolted. "Why?" I said, scanning the shadows. Maria's voice was shaky. I don't know. He just stood up and walked out, like he knew where to go. We didn't waste time arguing. Jake took point, and we pushed out into the street. The cold hit like a slap, the kind that wakes you up in the worst way. The boy's trail wasn't hard to follow. His small footprints stood out in the thin layer of dust on the sidewalk. They led straight down the middle of the street, past burnt cars and boarded storefronts. Not hiding, not running, just walking. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and went silent. We caught up to him outside an old pharmacy. He was standing in the doorway, staring inside. The door hung open, glass shattered across the pavement. I stepped up beside him, crouching so my eyes were level with his. What's in there? He didn't answer, but his shoulders rose and fell faster than before. Jake swept in first, rifle raised. The inside was dim, lit only by the moon through the broken windows. Shelves lay overturned, pill bottles scattered like confetti. The smell hit me. Copper and rot. Behind the counter, 2 bodies. One was fresh, the other older. The fresh one, a man, had been shot in the chest, his eyes still wide in shock. The older body had the telltale grey skin, the sunken eyes of the infected. Its jaw hung slack, one arm twisted at an impossible angle. Maria gagged and turned away. Jake was already searching the shelves. We need whatever meds are left. I kept one eye on the boy, who hadn't moved from the doorway. He was staring at the fresh corpse like he recognized it. We found painkillers, antibiotics, a few bottles of clean water. Enough to matter. Jake stuffed them into his pack, then froze mid-motion. From outside came the faint sound of glass crunching under slow, deliberate steps. I moved to the window. Across the street, 3 figures stood in the pale light, not infected, but armed. One had a crossbow slung over his back. The other 2 carried pistols. Their clothes were mismatched, scavenged from different uniforms and jackets. They weren't looking around. They were looking straight at the pharmacy. Jake's whisper was sharp. Back door. Now. We moved fast, but the pharmacy's back exit opened into an alley blocked by a half-collapsed dumpster. The boy slipped past me and started climbing it like he'd done it before. Maria followed, shoving the meds over to Jake on the other side. I was last, hauling myself up as a voice called out from the street. Drop the packs and we'll let you walk. Jake didn't answer. He fired a warning shot into the air. It was enough to make them pause, but not enough to make them leave. We ran until our lungs burned. The streets blurred into a maze of shadow and brick. Every doorway a possible trap. Finally, we ducked into a narrow service corridor between 2 apartment buildings. The smell of oil and dust thick in the air. The boy sat against the wall, clutching his bear again like he'd never let go. Maria knelt beside him, whispering something I couldn't hear. Jake leaned close to me. They're not random scavengers. They knew exactly where to find us. I thought of the wet footprints in the stockroom. We're not the only ones tracking something tonight. The corridor was barely 3 feet wide, the brick walls closing in like the jaws of a trap. The air smelled of rust and whetstone, and somewhere water dripped steadily, counting out the seconds we didn't have. Jake had one knee on the ground, rifle steady, watching the narrow mouth of the alley we'd come through. I crouched beside him, pistol ready, while Maria kept the boy pressed against the far wall. They're not gonna just give up, Jake murmured. Then we don't wait for them to make the first move, I said. The first sign was the scrape of boots on pavement. Then a voice, low and calm. Come on out. You've got something that belongs to us. I could just make out the shadow of a man standing at the entrance, crossbow in hand. His stance relaxed like he'd done this 100 times. Another figure stepped in behind him, a pistol dangling from her fingers. She was tall, hair tied back, a jacket that might have once been military. The third stayed out of sight, but I could hear the faint metallic sound of a weapon being checked. Jake didn't lower his rifle. "Not yours," he said. "Turn around." The woman with the pistols smiled like she'd been expecting that. "Not how this works. You've got medicine. We need it. And the kid." At that, Maria tightened her hold on the boy. "Over my dead body," she hissed. The man with the crossbow tilted his head. "That can be arranged. They didn't rush us, which worried me more than if they had. Slow predators are confident predators." Jake leaned close. "We make a break for the other end. If we're fast, we can." He didn't get to finish. A shape dropped from above. Someone had climbed the fire escape and come down behind us. Before I could turn, rough hands grabbed my arm, yanking me back. I twisted, driving my elbow into ribs, but another pair of hands went for my pistol. Jake spun, firing point blank. The shot lit the narrow space in a white flash, and the man behind me went down hard. The noise shattered the stillness, echoing down the corridor. And just like that, everything moved at once. The woman with the pistol ducked to the side, returning fire. The crossbow bolt clattered off the brick by my head. Maria screamed, not in fear, but in anger, as one of them lunged for the boy. She slashed with her knife, catching the attacker across the forearm. He cursed and stumbled back. Jake shoved me toward the far end. "Go, now!" We ran, boots slipping on damp concrete. The other end of the corridor opened into a wider street, but as we burst out, a fourth scavenger appeared, blocking the way. He was huge, with a beard that looked like it had been growing since before the outbreak. In his hands, a length of pipe wrapped in tape and nails. I didn't think I fired. The shot hit his shoulder, spinning him, but it didn't drop him. He swung the pipe as I closed the distance, the nails whistling past my face. I ducked under the swing, grabbed the barrel of my pistol with both hands, and drove it into his jaw. He went down, but not for long. Jake's rifle barked twice, and the big man went still. "Keep moving," he shouted. We sprinted down the street, ducking between rusted cars. The boy was crying now, quiet but steady, clutching Maria's jacket. Behind us, the scavengers regrouped, their shouts bouncing off the walls. We cut down an alley, then another, turning until I wasn't sure which way was north anymore. The city was a maze, and every shadow felt like it could be hiding another threat. Finally, we stumbled into what used to be a small parking lot. The chain-link fence on the far side was partially collapsed, opening onto another street. Jake stopped, chest heaving. "We need high ground. Somewhere we can see them coming." I scanned the buildings. Most were 3 or 4 stories, but one on the corner had a wide glass front and a sign that read, "Holland's Furniture Outlet." "Top floor of that," I said. "Only one stairwell to guard." We crossed fast, climbed through a broken window, and made our way up. The showroom was a chaos of overturned chairs and dusty mattresses, but the stairs were clear. On the 3rd floor, we found a small office with windows facing 2 streets. Jake took position by one, rifle ready. Maria sat the boy in a chair, trying to calm him. He was still shaking, eyes darting to every sound. "They were going to take me," he whispered. "No one's taking you," Maria said firmly. Jake looked over at me. "They won't come tonight. They'll wait for daylight. Hunt's easier then." "Unless they bring more people," I said. He didn't disagree. We took turns keeping watch. The night dragged, every creak of the building making my nerves twitch. Around 3 a.m., I saw movement. 2 of them, walking the street below, not looking up, just passing by. Or maybe making sure we knew they were still there. Morning came pale and cold. We hadn't slept much, but we couldn't stay. They know the area better than we do, Jake said, shouldering his pack. We keep moving until they stop following or we stop breathing. The boy didn't eat the ration bar Maria offered. He just stared at the wall, his bear clutched tight. Maria knelt in front of him. We're going to be okay, but you have to stay close, all right? He nodded without looking at her. We slipped out a back stairwell into another alley. The streets were quiet. Too quiet. I kept my pistol up, eyes on the rooftops. Every so often I caught a flicker of movement in a window or a shadow that didn't seem right. At one intersection, Jake stopped us with a raised hand. Ahead, the street narrowed, funneled between two buildings. And in the middle of it, a crossbow bolt, sticking upright from the asphalt, a strip of red cloth tied to the shaft. A message. We're still here. The bolt with the red cloth swayed in the light morning breeze. It wasn't a warning. It was bait. Jake crouched, scanning the rooftops. They're trying to herd us. Into what? I asked. Someplace they can close off. Maria's grip on the boy's hand tightened. We can go back. I shook my head. That's exactly what they want. We didn't go down the narrow street. Instead, Jake led us 2 blocks over, through an alley littered with broken glass and the charred shell of a delivery van. The city smelled like rot and cold metal. No recent fires, no food cooking. No one lived here anymore, except the people hunting us. We were halfway across an intersection when the first shot rang out. Not the deep boom of a rifle, the sharp, angry crack of a pistol. The bullet ricocheted off a car hood near my shoulder, spraying rust flakes into the air. Cover, Jake barked. We dove behind a stack of pallets, wood splintering as more rounds hit. From somewhere to our right, a voice called out, the same calm male voice from yesterday. Not gonna tell you again. Give us the kid and walk away. I peered around the edge. They'd split up, 2 coming from the north, 1 circling east. 3 that I can see, I whispered. Jake nodded. There'll be more. We couldn't stay pinned. The pallets wouldn't stop rifle fire if they had it. And sooner or later, infected would hear the noise. Jake motioned for Maria to keep low, then mouthed, 2 minutes, and slipped into the alley behind us. The gunfire eased almost as if they were letting us breathe. That made me nervous. Meant they were moving pieces into place. Maria shifted, shielding the boy. Claire, what if Jake doesn't? A burst of rifle fire cut her off. Not aimed at us, but at someone else. Then Jake's voice, shouting, "Move!" I yanked Maria to her feet, and we sprinted across the street toward the source of the rifle fire. Jake was crouched behind a burned-out SUV, smoke curling from his barrel. One of the scavengers lay sprawled nearby, blood seeping into the cracks of the pavement. "They're flanking," he said, pointing. Sure enough, the tall woman from before was coming down the sidewalk, pistol raised. Behind her, the bearded man, somehow still alive, limped with that same brutal pipe in hand. No time to think. I fired twice at the woman. The first missed. The second caught her in the side, spinning her. She staggered but stayed on her feet, firing back. A round tore into the SUV's door inches from Jake's head. Jake swore and returned fire. The woman ducked into a doorway, gone. The bearded man came straight for me. I stepped back, firing, but he kept coming, his limp turning into a lurching charge. The pipe swung at my head. I ducked, felt it slice the air above me, then drove my shoulder into his gut. He grunted, but his hands locked around my jacket. We slammed into the hood of a car, the impact rattling my teeth. Before he could raise the pipe again, Maria's knife appeared over his shoulder. She stabbed hard once, twice. The man dropped, gasping, blood on his shirt. We barely had time to catch breath. A new voice shouted from somewhere behind us. "They're in the open! Now!" Bullets chewed into the car's frame. Jake pulled me down. "We have to get inside." The closest building was a 2-story pawn shop. We ducked through the shattered glass door, the boy crying now, high and sharp. Inside, the smell hit first. Dust, mold, and something older, heavier. We pushed deeper, past counters still cluttered with tarnished rings and cracked guitars. The back stairwell creaked under our weight as we climbed. On the second floor, we found a small room with one window facing the street. Jake knelt there, keeping watch. I checked the hallway. Empty for now. Maria sat with the boy, trying to calm him, whispering something I couldn't catch. The quiet didn't last. Boots hit the floor downstairs. Glass crunching. A voice, the same man, called out again. "Every bullet you fire is one less you've got to keep the dead off you. Think about that." I heard the metallic click of a crossbow being drawn. Jake's jaw tightened. "They're coming up." The first scavenger rounded the corner, young, twitchy, shotgun in hand. Jake dropped him with a single shot. Then chaos, 2 more behind him, firing blind up the stairs. Plaster exploded from the wall beside me. I ducked, returned fire, caught one in the leg. He went down screaming, his shotgun clattering away. The third rushed me, and was faster than I expected. He slammed into me, driving me into the wall. My pistol skittered across the floor. We grappled, his hands going for my throat. "I need him hard in the ribs," he gasped, loosening his grip just enough for me to shove him back. Jake's rifle barked again. The man crumpled. Then, silence. No voices, no boots on the stairs, just the boy's ragged breathing. Jake glanced at me. "That's not all of them." "Then where?" Glass shattered behind us. I spun. The tall woman was coming in through the window, blood still seeping from her side. Pistol raised. She fired. The round grazed my arm. Hot pain blooming. I dove, tackling her. We both crashed into the floor, her pistol sliding under a shelf. She fought like someone who'd been doing it long before the world ended. Elbows, knees, teeth. I caught one to the jaw that made my vision swim. But I wasn't going to let her take the kid. I drove my forearm into her throat, pinning her. Her hands clawed at me, nails raking my cheek. "Stop," Maria shouted. I didn't. Not until she went limp. Jake pulled me off, breathing hard. "We can't stay. They'll regroup." I nodded, still shaking. My arm throbbed. But we were alive. For now. We left the pawn shop through the roof, crossing to the next building via a sagging plank someone had laid between them. From there, we could see the street. Bodies sprawled in the morning light, and somewhere in the distance the sound of infected beginning to stir. The scavengers would be back, but so would we, if they gave us a reason. The rooftops gave us a little distance, but not enough. We could still see them below. The scavengers moving through the street, dragging their dead away, checking shadows for movement. They weren't leaving. "They'll track us," Jake muttered, watching through the scope. "They'll wait until we stop moving, then hit us again." "They want the boy," Maria said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made my stomach turn. She didn't add, "and they'll kill us after." She didn't have to. We kept moving, crossing from one rooftop to the next, until the planks ran out, and we were forced back to street level. The city here was different. Less rubble, fewer burned cars. At first it felt like maybe it hadn't been touched as badly. Then we noticed the doors. Every single building had been barricaded from the outside. Heavy wooden boards nailed across them. Chains looped through handles. Windows covered in sheets of corrugated metal. Maria slowed, frowning. They weren't keeping people out. They were keeping something in. The boy stumbled, and I caught him by the arm. "You okay?" I asked. He didn't answer. He hadn't said a word since we met him. When I looked into his eyes, there was a strange emptiness there. Not fear, exactly, but something like exhaustion, deep down where no sleep could touch it. We reached a small plaza with a cracked fountain in the center. The sun had climbed high enough to throw hard light across the pavement, and that was when I saw it. The trail of blood smears leading away from the fountain toward an alley. Jake crouched to touch it, then jerked his hand back. Still wet. That means whoever it is. Maria began. "They're close," I finished. Before we could decide whether to follow, a sound came from above. Not gunfire, not the groan of the infected. A low, repeated tapping. Metal against metal. We all froze. Then a figure stepped into view on a rooftop 2 stories up. A man in a tattered green jacket, tapping a length of rebar against the railing. "Up here," he called. His voice was rough, but not hostile. "Before they find you." We didn't move right away. Could have been another trap. He must have seen our hesitation, because he raised his hands, palms out. "You can stay down there if you want. Just know they're sweeping this block right now." Maria glanced at me. I nodded, and we moved, quick across the plaza, up a narrow metal fire escape that creaked under our weight. On the roof, the man kept his distance. Up close, I could see he was older, maybe late 50s, with wiry grey hair and a face like dried leather. "You're lucky I spotted you before they did," he said, tilting his head toward the south. Jake didn't lower his rifle. "And who are they to you?" He shrugged. "Scavengers, killers, same as everyone else these days, I guess." Maria's eyes narrowed. "So which are you?" The man smiled without humor. "Name's Harris. I'm just trying to keep breathing. You've got a kid, which means you've got a target painted on you. Those types will chase you across the city if they think you're carrying something they want." Jake said nothing, but he was still watching Harris like he expected him to sprout claws. Harris gestured toward a hatch leading down into the building. "Got some water?" "Not much else, but it's quiet." I hesitated. Quiet in the city wasn't always a good sign. Still, the boy was pale, shaking. We needed somewhere to stop, even for a few minutes. We followed him down. The inside smelled faintly of oil and dust. It was an old auto shop. Counters stripped bare. Walls smeared with years of grime. In the center was a battered couch and a crate of mismatched bottles filled with cloudy water. Harris poured a little into a tin cup and handed it to the boy. He drank like he hadn't had anything in days. "You folks headed somewhere?" Harris asked, sitting on the edge of the counter. Jake answered for us. "Anywhere that's not here." Harris nodded slowly. "Then you'll want to avoid 9th Avenue. Whole blocks crawling. Not just the dead, either them." Maria frowned. "They've taken over that much ground?" "More," Harris said. "But they can't hold it forever. Noise draws the dead, and the dead don't care about walls." I didn't trust him entirely, but he'd given us something useful, a warning. We finished the water, thanked him, and made for the rear door. That was when the first scream hit. It came from somewhere close. Too close. And it wasn't a scavenger. It was that wet, guttural sound only an infected could make. Harris swore under his breath. "They must have caught wind of your gunfight." I spun toward the door we'd just entered through, but Maria grabbed my arm. "Claire, listen." The scream was joined by another, then another. Within seconds, it was a chorus. Dozens of them, maybe more, echoing through the tight streets. "They're hunting," Harris said grimly. We bolted for the back exit. The alley behind the shop was narrow, littered with trash cans and rusted bikes. The first infected appeared at the far end. A man in a shredded suit, jaw hanging at an unnatural angle. He saw us and broke into a run. Jake shot him clean through the head, but more shapes appeared behind him. We ran, twisting alleys, broken fences, narrow stairwells between crumbling buildings. Every turn brought more. Not a horde, not yet, but enough to keep us moving without pause. The boy stumbled once and nearly went down. I hauled him back to his feet. He didn't look at me. He just kept running. We burst out onto a wider street and froze. Ahead of us, at the far end, was a barricade. Not scavenger-made, military. Sandbags, razor wire, a rusted Humvee half-blocking the way. Beyond it, I could see what looked like tents, their fabric long torn but still standing. Quarantine camp. Harris muttered. Maria's eyes flicked between us. "If it's empty," Jake cut her off. "If it's empty, there's a reason." The infected were still behind us. We didn't have time to argue. We sprinted for the barricade. The razor wire had gaps. Someone had cut through in places, and we squeezed through one. Inside, the camp was silent. Rows of cots sat in the open air, each one stained and sun-bleached. In the center was a cluster of medical tents, their flaps stirring faintly in the wind. We slowed, scanning for movement. No infected inside the wire. No scavengers. Just stillness. Maria knelt by one of the cots, frowning. "These haven't been touched in months." "Then why's the wire cut?" Jake asked. That was when we heard it. A single, deliberate footstep from inside the nearest tent. I raised my pistol, Jake his rifle. The flap shifted, and a figure emerged. A woman, maybe mid-30s, wearing a filthy medical coat. Her hands were empty, but her eyes were wide and unblinking. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice cracked, like she hadn't spoken in weeks. Before we could answer, more footsteps sounded from the other tents. The woman in the medical coat stood completely still, her eyes darting between each of us like she was counting threats. Behind her, the tent flap stirred again, and two more figures emerged. A man with a gaunt face and a limp, and a teenage girl with a dirty blanket wrapped around her shoulders. No one spoke. The only sound was the distant, hollow moan of the infected somewhere beyond the barricade, carried on the wind like a promise. Jake's finger was tense on the trigger, the barrel of his rifle tracking the man's movements. Maria had stepped half in front of the boy without even realizing it, her pistol angled low but ready. I kept my voice level. "We're not here to hurt you." The woman's gaze flicked to the weapons, then back to my face. That's what the last group said. Her words hung heavy in the still air. I didn't know what the last group had done, but from the look in her eyes, it hadn't ended with anyone shaking hands. "Lower your weapons," she said. "All of you." Jake snorted. "Not happening. If you don't," she replied, "you won't make it out of this camp alive." It wasn't a threat. Not the way she said it. It sounded more like a fact. Harris leaned toward me, whispering, "She's bluffing. Camp's empty. 3 of them? No way, The metallic clack of a bolt being drawn cut him off. From the shadowed space between the tents, 2 more people appeared, both carrying battered old hunting rifles. Their clothes were mismatched, their faces sunburned and hollow, but their hands didn't shake. Now we were the ones outnumbered. "All right," I said slowly. my eyes never leaving the woman's. "We'll lower them." I motioned to Jake. He hesitated, jaw tight, then eased his rifle down. Maria followed, and Harris reluctantly lowered his pistol. The woman nodded once. Inside, we were herded toward the largest tent in the center of the camp. The air inside was thick with the smell of mildew and faint rot. Folding chairs ringed a table covered in maps, scraps of paper, and what looked like pages torn from medical logs. The woman took the chair at the head of the table, motioning for us to sit. "I'm Dr. Alyssa Gray," she said. "This was Camp Delta, established during the first month of the outbreak. The military abandoned it in week 4. "Why?" Maria asked. Dr. Gray's mouth tightened. "Because they realized quarantine doesn't work when the infection spreads in hours, not days. We were a dumping ground for the possibly infected. When supplies ran low, they pulled out, left us behind." The teenage girl shifted in her chair, pulling the blanket tighter. The man with the limp spoke next. "We've been keeping this place alive ever since." "Barely." Jake's eyes swept the tent. "Alive? There's barely anyone here." Dr. Gray didn't flinch. "There were more, until the scavengers found us. That explained the cut wire. It also meant we weren't the first people to step through it in weeks, and maybe not the first to survive." I studied her face. "You let us in. Why?" Her gaze hardened. "Because you've drawn attention to yourselves. The gunfire earlier, the shouting. They'll be here soon, scavengers and infected. We can't move quickly with the injured, and if we try to hide, they'll find us. So you want us to fight for you," Jake said flatly. Dr. Gray didn't deny it. "You want shelter for the night? You earn it." Maria looked at me, silently asking the question I didn't want to answer. We had no safe place to go. Out there was a death sentence tonight. In here, we were surrounded by strangers with guns and an agenda. I nodded once. "We'll help." That seemed to surprise her. She studied me for a long moment, then stood. "Then we need to prepare. If the scavengers come first, they'll scout the perimeter. If the infected arrive first..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "They gave us the south side of the camp to cover." Jake checked the sandbags for gaps while Maria helped the teenage girl. Her name was Leah. "Drag old crates into firing positions." Harris kept muttering under his breath about how we were about to get caught in a fight that wasn't ours. I ignored him. As we worked, Leah spoke quietly to Maria. "They came at night last time," she said. "No lights, just shadows moving between the cots. When the shooting started, the dead came in too. My dad didn't make it." Maria didn't ask for more details. She just handed her another crate to carry. When the sun began to dip, the camp changed. The survivors who'd been keeping out of sight appeared with weapons in hand. Someone lit a single red lantern in the center of the camp, just enough to cast long shadows between the tents. Jake took up position behind the sandbags, eyes on the street beyond the wire. I crouched beside him, pistol ready. For a while, nothing moved. The city seemed frozen in that strange, tense quiet it sometimes had after sunset, like it was holding its breath. Then Harris murmured, "We've got company." At first I saw nothing. Then, between two buildings, a shape moved, low, slow, deliberate. Not the jerky, mindless lurch of the infected. This was a person. Another shadow appeared, and another. 3, 4, 5 figures slipping between the rubble, using every scrap of cover. Jake's hands tightened on his rifle. "They're scouting," he whispered. I kept my pistol low. If we fired first, the noise would bring the dead. But if we waited too long, the scavengers could slip right through the gaps in the wire. Dr. Gray's voice crackled softly in the small radio by my side. "Hold your fire. Let them get closer." We need to know how many. I didn't like it, but she was right. The shadows crept closer until I could see them clearly. Faces smeared with dirt and ash, eyes hard and searching. One carried a machete, another a battered shotgun. Then one of them froze, looking straight at me. I realized too late that the setting sun had caught the edge of my pistol. His hand went up, a signal. Shapes moved in the darkness. More of them. Jake hissed. They're not scouting anymore. We were seconds from firing when a sound cut through the tense air. A deep, guttural moan from somewhere far behind the scavengers. Every head turned. The infected were coming. And now, the scavengers knew exactly where we were. The first scream wasn't human. It was that wet, rattling roar I'd come to dread. The sound of a body that should have been silent still finding the breath to howl. Somewhere beyond the scavengers, something crashed over a chain-link fence. The metallic clatter echoed like a warning bell. For half a second, no one moved. Then the scavenger with the shotgun raised his weapon and fired. The blast tore through the sandbags, showering dirt into my eyes. Jake was already firing back, his rifle barking 3 sharp times. One of the scavengers dropped, another dove for cover behind a rusted car. The moaning grew louder. From the far end of the street, shapes began to spill into view. Dozens of them, swaying and stumbling, faces pale and stretched in that awful slack way. The dead had heard the gunfire. They always did. Hold the south line. Dr. Gray's voice snapped over the radio. Don't let them breach. Easier said than done. 2 scavengers sprinted toward the wire, one with bolt cutters, the other firing wildly at us. Harris swore and dropped one with a single shot to the head, but the other made it to the fence. The clink of metal on metal was drowned out by another scavenger's yell. They're coming from the east, too. I risked a glance and felt my stomach drop. A second wave of infected was pouring out from between 2 collapsed buildings, faster than the first, their hands clawing at the ground as they ran. The scavengers were trapped between us and the dead, but that didn't slow them. "Maria, Leah," I shouted. "Get the wounded into the supply tent and bar it shut." Maria didn't argue. She grabbed Leah and vanished into the shadows, dragging 2 limping survivors with her. The scavenger with the cutters snapped the last of the wire and slipped through the gap. Jake met him halfway, slamming the butt of his rifle into the man's jaw. Bone cracked and the scavenger dropped, blood bubbling from his mouth. But the opening was there now, and the dead had seen it. They came through like water through a burst dam. Hands outstretched, teeth snapping, their rotting bodies knocking down the flimsy sandbags. I fired into the first one's face, felt warm spray hit my cheek, and stepped back as its body collapsed forward into the dirt. Another was already in its place. Harris was shouting, firing at both the scavengers and the infected. "We can't hold this. We have to move." Dr. Gray's voice crackled in my ear again. "Fall back to the central tent. Now." We broke away from the barricade, retreating down the narrow path between tents. The scavengers didn't follow. They were too busy fighting for their own lives as the infected closed on them from both sides. But some of the dead were faster. Too fast. One lunged at Harris, teeth clamping into his shoulder. His scream was raw, desperate. Jake didn't hesitate. One clean shot to the creature's skull. But Harris was already clutching the wound, eyes wide with a terrible knowledge. "Don't stop," Jake barked, dragging him forward. We burst into the central tent where Dr. Gray and the remaining survivors were barricading the entrances with tables and crates. The teenage girl, Leah, was clutching a pistol that looked too big for her hands. The first infected slammed into the tent wall, the canvas bowing inward. Another hit the other side. The sound of snarling and snapping teeth surrounded us. Dr. Gray's eyes flicked to Harris's wound, but she didn't say a word. "Back wall's clear," she told me instead. "There's an alley that leads out the rear gate, but we'll have to push through before they surround us completely." Jake glanced toward the barricaded entrances where fists and claws were already tearing at the fabric. "We won't make it all together," he said. I hated that he was right. If we moved as one group, the infected would pull us down in seconds. "We split," I said. "2 groups. One draws them off. The other makes for the alley." Maria's voice was sharp from the far side of the tent. "And who gets to be bait?" "I will," Jake said immediately. "Harris can come with me." Harris opened his mouth to argue, then looked down at his bleeding shoulder and shut it again. There was no time for debate. Dr. Gray handed me a folded city map, her hand trembling. "The alley leads west toward the river. Cross the old bridge if you can. There's a warehouse there. Safer than open streets." Jake checked his rifle, gave me one last grim nod, and then ripped open the eastern flap of the tent. Gunfire erupted immediately as he and Harris sprinted into the street, yelling, firing, making as much noise as possible. The infected followed. "Go!" Dr. Gray shouted. I grabbed Maria and Leah, pushing them toward the back wall. 2 men shoved crates aside, revealing the narrow gap between the tent and the fence. We slipped through one by one, the night air hitting us like cold water. The alley was darker than pitch, littered with overturned trash cans and broken glass. Every step crunched. I kept my pistol up, eyes darting to every shadow. Halfway down the alley, something moved. Not the jerky, uncoordinated lurch of the infected. This was deliberate. "Wait," I hissed. A figure stepped out from behind a dumpster, hands raised. He was young, maybe 19, wearing a scavenger's jacket but with no weapon in sight. "They left me," he said. His voice cracked. "Please, don't leave me out here." Maria's hand tightened on her pistol. "He could be leading them right to us," she whispered. I looked into his face. He was shaking so hard I could see it in the dim light. If it was an act, it was a good one. Before I could decide, the sound of gunfire from the street exploded again, followed by a scream that I knew belonged to Harris. We didn't have time. "Come on," I told the boy. "Stay in the middle. Don't try anything." We moved fast, the distant roars and gunfire echoing off the walls. At the far end of the alley, I spotted the chain-link gate Dr. Gray had described. It hung crooked on its hinges, but it would do. Maria and I shoved it open, just as a shape lunged from the darkness beyond. The boy screamed. I fired. The infected dropped at my feet, its jaw snapping twice before going still. We spilled out into the open street beyond, the air thick with the smell of smoke and rot. Somewhere far behind us, the camp was still under siege. I didn't know if Jake or Dr. Gray would make it out, but I knew one thing: the streets of the city were waiting for us, and they were far from silent now. The street beyond the gate felt like stepping into another world, a world already lost. Windows were smashed, doors hung open like mouths frozen mid-scream, and the air carried that awful cocktail of gunpowder, smoke, and the copper tang of blood. No headlights, no hum of traffic, just the wind moving trash down the cracked asphalt. And somewhere far away, a chorus of moans slowly getting closer. "Which way?" Maria asked. Her voice was too loud. I gave her a look that said so. "West," I whispered, pointing toward a block where the buildings closed in tighter. "Bridge is that way. Keep close to the walls." The scavenger boy, he still hadn't told us his name, clung to the back of our group like a stray dog that couldn't decide if it was wanted or not. Leah kept glancing at him, one hand hovering over the pistol at her hip. We moved past the first intersection quickly. The body of a police cruiser was wrapped around a light pole, its hood crumpled like tinfoil. Dried blood sprayed the cracked windshield from inside. Leah stared at it a moment too long. "Eyes forward," I murmured. "Don't think about who it was." We passed a half-burned convenience store. Shelves were overturned. Half-melted candy wrappers scattered across the floor. The smell hit before we even crossed the doorway. Sweet rot and decay. I kept my pistol raised as we skirted past. That was when I saw the first one. It was inside, crouched over a corpse, its back rising and falling with wet, greedy movements. Its skin looked like paper stretched over bone, its jaw working in slow, deliberate bites. It didn't see us. Yet, I motioned everyone past, my stomach churning. We were halfway down the next block when the boy finally spoke. "My name's Evan." Maria didn't turn her head. "That's supposed to make us trust you." "I'm not with them anymore," he said quickly. "The scavengers, I was never. I just followed because they had food. I didn't." "You were wearing their jacket," Leah cut in. "Means you stood by when they raided camps. When they shot people." Evan's mouth opened, then closed again. I kept walking, but my eyes were scanning every window, every doorway. The deeper we went, the more it felt like the city was holding its breath. That was when I heard it. A faint tapping sound. Tap, tap. I froze. Maria almost bumped into me. "What is it?" I tilted my head, trying to place it. The sound was coming from the building on our left. An old brick apartment complex with boarded windows. Then the tapping stopped. "Keep moving," I whispered. We made it 2 more steps before a voice called from above. "Hey, you alive down there?" We looked up. A man was leaning out of a 2nd-story window, waving. His hair was wild. His face gaunt but alert. "I've got water," he shouted. "Come inside before they find you." Evan took a step toward the door. "We can't stay out here." Maria caught his arm. "And walk into a stranger's den. You think that's safer?" The man's eyes darted down the street nervously. "You've got maybe 5 minutes before that noise draws them." "You're cool." Leah glanced at me. "Claire?" I didn't like it. It could be a trap, but the moans were louder now, and the faint thud of feet, too many feet, was starting to echo off the buildings. "Inside," I said. "But stay sharp." The lobby was dark, the smell of mildew strong enough to sting my nose. The man led us up the stairs quickly, avoiding the elevator entirely. On the 2nd floor, he pushed open a door into what had once been someone's apartment. The blinds were drawn, but there were candles on the counter, a pile of canned goods in one corner, and 2 makeshift cots against the wall. "Name's Mason," he said, handing me a bottle of water. "I saw the scavengers moving this way earlier. Figured they'd draw the dead in." Maria stayed by the door, watching him closely. "You live here alone?" Mason hesitated. "Now I do." I didn't ask what that meant. I'd seen enough empty strollers and blood-stained toys to know. We were only there for maybe 3 minutes before the first infected reached the building. The moans swelled into a deafening chorus outside, followed by pounding against the boarded-up front entrance. Mason's eyes went wide. "You didn't lead them here, did you?" "They were coming no matter what," I said, moving to the window. I peeled back a corner of the blind and my stomach dropped. At least 30 of them were in the street now, and more were shuffling in from every side. "We have to get to the roof," I said. "They'll tear through the boards eventually." We climbed fast. Mason led the way up 2 more flights to a narrow stairwell that ended at a metal hatch. He shoved it open, and cold air rushed in. The roof was flat, with a low wall around the edge. From here, I could see the bridge in the distance, but between us and it was a writhing, endless mass of infected flooding the streets. Evan's face went pale. "There's no way through that." Maria scanned the rooftops. Maybe. If we go building to building. It was risky. One bad jump and you were in the street with them. But staying here wasn't an option. Already, the building shook faintly under the pounding from below. We move, I said. Now. We crossed to the edge and looked at the next building. A gap of maybe 7 feet, with a 3-story drop between. Mason went first, landing in a crouch. Leah followed, light on her feet. Evan made it, barely. Maria was next. She leapt, landed, rolled. I was last. I took a running start, my boots slapping the concrete, the roar of the dead below pushing me faster. And then I was across. From there, we kept moving, leaping gaps, climbing over vents and pipes. The infected followed in the streets below, their moans rising into a single awful voice that seemed to fill the whole city. By the time we stopped to catch our breath, my legs were shaking. We can't keep this up all night, Mason said. We won't have to, I replied, pointing to a larger building ahead with a reinforced door and no broken windows. That one looks intact. Could be our best chance for rest. Maria eyed it. Or it's full of something worse. I didn't answer. I just started moving toward it, the wind whipping the smell of the dead into my face. Because in this city, the only way to survive was to keep going, even if the silence was long gone. The final rooftop was slick with dew, the concrete damp beneath my boots. We were all breathing hard, even Mason, though he tried to hide it. The building ahead looked like a fortress compared to the others we'd passed. Reinforced door, metal shutters over the windows. No visible signs of damage. The kind of place you might have thought could survive the first wave of the outbreak. Maria whispered, "Looks too perfect." "Too perfect is better than dead," I said. "We check it, we decide." We dropped down to the fire escape, our boots clanging against the metal. The sound carried farther than I wanted, but the infected below were too busy funneling into the smaller streets we'd just escaped from. Mason reached the door first, testing the handle. Locked, but he knelt, pulling a bent piece of metal from his back pocket. Used to work construction. Learned a few tricks. Evan watched him nervously. "You mean breaking into places?" Mason didn't look up. "You mean surviving?" The lock clicked, and the heavy door swung inward with a low groan. The air inside was still and stale, but clean. No trace of rot or blood. Our flashlights swept across a wide, empty lobby. It looked like an old office building. Reception desk, plastic plants, framed motivational posters now warped by moisture. We stepped inside, and I shut the door behind us. The sound of the lock sliding back into place was comforting in a way I hadn't felt since Haven. Maria checked her watch. 2 hours, till sunrise. Leah leaned against the wall, exhaling hard. 2 hours of rest could save our lives tomorrow. Mason nodded toward a stairwell. Let's get higher up. Less chance of anything breaking in. We climbed to the 3rd floor, finding an empty corner office. Its big windows were covered with thick blinds, the carpet dusty but intact. We spread out, everyone too drained to argue about watch rotations yet. That was when I noticed it. A smell. Not strong, but sharp, metallic. I moved toward the far corner, my flashlight grazing the floor. That's when the beam caught something. A smear of dried blood leading toward a closed supply closet. "Hold up," I said quietly. Maria's head lifted. "What is it?" "Not sure yet." I moved closer, gun in hand. The door was cracked open by an inch. I pushed it open. A body slumped out, or what was left of one. The face was almost gone, not eaten, but smashed. The clothes were soaked through with dark stains, and the arms were bound with duct tape. Evan staggered back, his face white. "What the hell happened to him?" Leah's voice was flat. "Not the infected. This was human. Mason swore under his breath, stepping back from the doorway. "We need to leave. Now." I shook my head. "Leave and go where? Streets are worse than this building. If there's someone here, they know we're here now. And if they wanted us dead, they would have tried already." Maria frowned. "Unless they're waiting." That thought sat heavy in the air. We didn't have time to finish the argument. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Leah spun toward the sound, pistol raised. I caught the faint shadow under the doorframe, not shuffling, not limping. Human steps. The knob turned slowly. I didn't wait for it to open. I yanked the door wide and leveled my gun. A man stood there, mid-30s maybe, wearing a dirty flannel shirt and a hunting knife on his belt. His eyes were calm. Too calm for someone surprised. "You shouldn't be here," he said simply. Maria stepped forward. "We're just looking for a place to stay the night." The man's gaze moved over each of us, lingering on Mason. "You brought a lot of noise with you." More footsteps approached. 2 more men appeared in the hallway, both carrying rifles. Evan took a step back. "We don't want trouble." "Then you'll give us your weapons," the first man interrupted. "And your packs. Food. Water. Everything." Leah's jaw tightened. "So much for hospitality." The man didn't blink. "You can keep your lives. That's the best offer you'll get tonight." The air in the room went tight, every muscle in my body ready to snap. I'd been in standoffs before, but this one had the kind of stillness that could shatter into blood in a second. Mason's voice was low. "Claire," I didn't answer. I was watching their trigger fingers. One wrong twitch, and then it came. A sound from outside, not human. A distant scream, high and raw, cutting through the night air. The men turned slightly toward the windows, just for a second. That's when the pounding started. From the ground floor. The infected had found the building. The first man cursed, snapping his rifle up. "Damn it, this is on you." "No," I said, already moving toward the door. "This is on all of us now." The next 30 seconds were chaos. Gunfire erupted from the hallway, as one of the riflemen leaned over the stairwell and opened up. Mason grabbed Evan and shoved him toward the far side of the office. Leah was yelling something I couldn't hear over the roar. The infected were flooding in fast, their moans growing louder, overlapping into that terrible hungry chorus. And then the first one broke through. It came from the stairwell, a blur of pale limbs and snapping teeth. The nearest rifleman didn't fire fast enough. It hit him square in the chest, taking him down hard. The others surged up behind it. The hallway dissolved into a frenzy of movement. Shots, screams, the wet rip of flesh. "Out the window!" I shouted, grabbing Maria's arm. Mason smashed the blinds aside, revealing the fire escape. The drop wasn't far, but the street below was already seething with the dead. We'd have to move fast, or not at all. Leah covered us, firing in controlled bursts as we scrambled out. Evan slipped, Mason caught him, and I was last through. Behind me, I heard the first man in flannel screaming, and then nothing but the tearing sounds. We hit the fire escape and ran, boots slamming metal, the whole structure shaking under our weight. The infected followed, not as fast as us, but relentless, pouring out of every opening in the building. By the time we reached the alley below, I knew we weren't getting back inside anywhere tonight. We'd just have to keep running until we found somewhere the streets went quiet again. If such a place even existed anymore. We didn't stop until we reached the edge of the block. Our chests burning, our legs leaden. The city loomed ahead, endless and dark, every shadow hiding the possibility of teeth. Maria looked at me, her voice hoarse. "What now?" I scanned the streets. Somewhere out there, There had to be a corner of this nightmare that hadn't been claimed. We keep moving, I said, and we don't trust anything that calls itself safe.